Welcome to the Superbold podcast. My guest today is none other than entrepreneur and author Tucker Max. He is an extremely successful author, perhaps most notably for I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, which sold over 2 million copies. He is one of only 4 authors that had 3 books on the New York Times bestseller list simultaneously. That's kind of incredible. He is credited with creating a new genre in books called fratire. We'll talk about that. And then he went on to form Scribe Media, which has become the preeminent publishing service in the book industry. And I published my book, Superbold, with it. It's an incredible service and with a lot of valuable features. He's done some serious bold moves in his life and is into a whole array of interesting stuff. And we're going to try to dive into all of it. The language might get a bit salty, so be prepared. Tucker, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Fred. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive into something simple. Your name. Were you just lucky? It's like a Marvel superhero identity name.
No, I always joke that my parents really only gave me 2 things. They gave me a really cool name, and they didn't pretend they cared, right? So, because most people with parents that aren't great, they love them a lot. They're just bad at being parents, and so it's very confusing for them. My parents just didn't even pretend. So, which when I was a kid sucked, but now I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of great. It's easy to let go of it. But they did give me an amazing name. It is my real birth name. Like it's part of why my wife and I spent a lot of time naming our 4 kids, because we wanted to make sure they had equivalent kind of cool names where people are like, is that your real name? Like, yeah, that's a real name. Yeah.
Yeah, your daughter's name is Vaughn.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that about you. We're gonna talk about parenting, but let's even the concept. I want to dive quickly into the concept of fratire, which is a term that obviously is attributed to you, even though you were never in a fraternity. And I don't think it's as a writer myself. I don't see it as satire.
It's not. What I wrote was memoir. It was funny memoir. There was no satire about it. Like Jonathan Swift wrote satire, and Mark Twain wrote satire. I didn't write satire.
Exactly. Well, the illiterati managed to
at the New York Times, ironically. Yeah, it's normal for them to get literally all the facts exactly wrong.
Well, consistency is important in journalism, right? Yeah. We met, or I didn't really meet you. I was exposed to you, in not in the normal way, but at Tim Ferriss's opening the kimono thing, which was 2011, I think. And at the time, you were talking about reinventing yourself. Saying, you were talking about what is the next stage of your identity, because you had really established something fairly significant with the books, but I think you were feeling like it was played out. It's like there isn't a what next to this supposed genre you created for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I only had a certain amount of time I acted like that, and I had a certain amount of stories to tell. I mean, it was just a period. It was a slice of my life during a period of my life. And so I wrote, 4 books about it, and that was it, and especially because I got to the point where it was like, listen, partying and drinking and acting like a young idiot is super fun for a short period. And then it's not fun anymore, and I don't want to do it anymore. And so the only thing different between me and most people is I wrote all my stories down. Like that really was about it. There's not a whole lot of difference. And then it became a career and a thing, and it took me into a field, which is, fine and great. And I liked it, but I didn't want to, it never was my goal to be it was never my goal to be a writer. and it was never my goal to spend my life like partying or whatever. Like it was just like, oh, this is super fun for a while, and that's it, right? And so when and it took me a while to kind of learn all this, but pretty quickly I realized like I didn't want this to be my lifetime identity. So I didn't accept it. Like I went for a time. The end of my fourth book, a frat tire book, I retired from the genre. I'm never going to write in this genre again. It's wide open. Anyone can come do whatever they want in it, etc. And then, went and did other things.
So I have to tell you, I was listening to your book. I was riding my bike this week and listening to it'll become evident what I'm listening to, but it was the audiobook, and I love the way it started. This woman in this elegant, beautiful voice says, "Simon and Schuster presents Assholes Finish First." And it was like, I went like, wow, she made that sound like a really nice word. It didn't sound profane at all. I said, maybe she should read the whole book. It would be hilarious. But people thought I was insane because I'm riding along on my bike just laughing out loud. Because your kind of stuff, I went to an all boys high school. Yeah. And so your stuff really resonated. There's no boundaries when you're in an all boys high school, and that's how you chose to write. Something else has happened. I think you were the first person to use profanity in a book title.
I definitely wasn't the first ever. I mean, there was a book on bullshit that was older than mine. There's definitely, you can find other examples, but I was the one who started the modern wave of that. And then Mark Manson and all these other people followed, and so yeah, there was a lot of things that I think there was almost nothing I was truly the very first ever, but there were a lot of things where no one had done it in living memory or in a long time or whatever, right? Like, it's funny, a lot of people compared me and my stuff to Charles Bukowski, right? Because he wrote about very, very similar things, and Hunter S. Thompson. And ironic, I never read either of those two dudes before I started writing. My influences were like Chuck Palahniuk and P.J. O'Rourke, and Xenophon, like people like that, right? And so like I had not read, but there was a huge group of people who were like, oh yeah, literary heir to these people, and I read some of their stuff, and I'm like, they're great writers, brilliant, but like, man, they're so sad and depressed. I'm like, man, I hope that's not now.
They're not having fun. No.
Right. Well, it didn't seem like it. No.
Yeah.
And looking back now, I can actually see a lot more the similarities that they saw. That now with time and space and distance and maturity, and I kind of get what they were saying. And the other major difference is that I never draped myself in literary pretension. Like I hated that, whereas Bukowski did, and in his own way, Hunter S. Thompson did. Although they were different, I went the opposite. I'm like, no, I'm not playing that stupid game. I could have easily done that. But then I would have hated myself. And so I'm just not going to do that. So I didn't.
So my book is Superbold, is about how to cultivate the superpower of boldness. I believe boldness is an amazing transformational ability to develop if you have it. You seemed to default to boldness. Is there a point where that happened, where you basically started ignoring rules?
Well, those are two different things. Being bold and ignoring rules.
I
do both. I absolutely do both.
You do both, but I don't know if they intersect.
They do.
One
they do.
Cause
they
the other.
Absolutely intersect for me. All right, it's a great question. Because it's one of those things that's come so natural to me that, it's like asking Michael Phelps, why are you so good at swimming? Like he almost didn't, like people who are really good at things naturally, a lot of times have a lot of problems answering why, as opposed to someone who wasn't good at it and had to work really hard at it, right? So like feeling my emotions, something I wasn't good at, I had to work really hard at. I can be very articulate about that. But the things that I've been good at for my whole life, sometimes are even hard for me to identify. And being bold is one of those. Like, you're right. I have been that way almost my whole life. And thinking about it now, it's funny. It gets back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast about the two gifts my parents gave me: my name and not pretending like they cared. One of being neglected a lot as a kid. I wasn't abandoned. I was just very neglected. Has a lot of downsides. There's a lot of not good stuff from it, but there is upside as well. And one of the skills that I had to develop to survive was calling attention to myself and taking action. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't go make it, right? And so I would say, I bet I haven't really thought this through, but my first instinct response is, well, I had to be bold as a kid or I wasn't going to make it. And then I just kept going because it kept working, right? Because so many you're 100% right. Boldness, and the thesis of your book is, I think, 100% correct. Boldness is in such short supply and in such high demand. And if you can do it at all from any emotional orientation, you're going to be successful, which really explains, I think, if you want to look at the success, if you look at people who are either dumb or evil that are still successful, and you ask why, a lot of times the reason is because they were just bold. They had nothing else really going for them. In the case of being dumb or evil, like they had a lot not going for them, but they just kept taking action. They kept being bold, and that will work for a long time. Now, if you compare being bold with like being a moral, ethical person who's trying to do the right thing, then it's like you're off to the races, and there's no end to it, right? But I think, man, I think that really is it. I had to be bold because it's I can't tell you how many times, Fred, people have. I'm gonna tell you like a story. This is an. Okay, so I was in, you know who Ryan Holiday is, right?
Sure,
right,
of course, yeah.
Okay. No. Ryan was my first assistant. Like, I've known Ryan for years. Like, no, literally. Wow. Like, he started working for me right out of, I think he dropped out of college. Now, he was still working he was still in college when he was working for me. And then I helped him get a job at with Robert Greene, and then at the
okay, because I remember that was his next step. Yeah.
Well, I introduced him to Robert Greene. Like, Robert was a good friend of mine. Robert was looking for an assistant. I'm like, Robert, you should hire Ryan, because Ryan, smart, diligent, hard worker, and he ended up being
a hell of a researcher too. Yeah,
right. He did a fantastic job for Robert. And so anyway, Ryan's been a friend of mine for years, and years later when he was working for American Apparel, he was in New Orleans for some reason. So I went to visit him with the girl I was dating at the time. And this is like, I don't know, 15 years ago. It's before I met my current wife. And we went on a swamp tour. The swamp people on TV now, the gator hunter type. We went on like a tour with one of those like good old boy types, like not like one of the nice commercial ones. It was like a dude with an airboat, man, and it was us and like 3 other people. And it was like October, it was kind of November, it was kind of cold, so there weren't a lot of gators out. We only saw one, and it was maybe 3 feet, probably about 2 feet, maybe 1.5 feet. So a pretty young one. And he goes, and kind of gets up to it, and he was getting to the front of the boat because to try and reach it, and then the gator was swimming, and he couldn't. He was going to try and grab it and get out. And then so I'm like, here, you drive the boat, I'll get in the front and grab it. And he starts laughing, and then I get in the front, and he pulls up to it, and I reach down and I have pictures of this, pull the gator out by the tail, and you should have seen the look on the dude's face. He I'm all excited, I'm like, yeah, I got the gator. He runs up to the front of the boat, takes it from me, and then puts his dude, those things that was no more than 2 feet. So it was a pretty young gator, right? It was under a year old. That thing was still strong as hell, man. It shocked me how strong that was. And it was no joke. And the dude he grabbed me, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I got the gator. He goes, yeah, I know what you did. Why would you do that? And I'm like, well, weren't you going to do it? He's like, yeah, but I've been living here my whole life. This is what I do for a living. I'm like, like literally, I was confused. I was like, bro, if you were going to do it, why can't I do it? He looked at me, he goes, I have never in my entire life, and this dude was like 45, 50. I've never in my entire life seen anyone do what you just did. That's insane. To reach in this swamp and pick a gator out. You've never done this before. You just showed up here. And I was like, I honestly didn't think it was that remarkable. Like,
Right.
granted, if he had said, don't touch it, I wouldn't have that dude was going to do it. And I'll never forget, like Ryan was all shocked. And Ryan said, he goes, that's one of the most Tucker Max moments I've ever seen in my life. But it didn't occur to me. It's Tucker Max because it was like everyone else is shocked. A totally bold, ridiculous action that no one should be able to do. And I did it. And it didn't occur to me that it was that big of a deal. You know? Like that's,
and of
so
course,
you're right.
it went fine.
It went
right?
great. It went amazing. Right? I got a great picture with the gator, and it's like I had a fantastic time, and everyone else got to pet the gator, and it was like, and that dude probably still tells me, man, we had this crazy Yankee come and pick a gator out. Yeah. So yes, well, I've been doing that forever.
And most people either had that beaten out of them. Like, don't be an attention whore, don't be a show off, speak when you're spoken to. All of that stuff gets like played and played and played. I was that really shy person. I couldn't ask a girl out. I couldn't, I couldn't do a single cold call when a guy gave me a job to do it. I couldn't dial a single time. And eventually I created a business based on a phone number, 1-800-DENTIST, which is ridiculous that I couldn't make a phone call and suddenly, but I really hated the fact that I wasn't bold. And I would see people like you and I go like, why is he like this? Like, why is he not processing? Why is he not doing what I do? And you have this thing is you don't ever stop yourself. There's nothing in you that comes up with the worst case scenario and makes you stop.
Well, no, hold on. Like if that had been like a 6-foot gator, the danger signs would have gone off, right? So like there is a difference because you can definitely completely lacking of fear is not courage. That's dangerous, right?
Well, that's foolish. Yeah, I'm not talking, this was a physical example, but I'm talking more about social stuff and business stuff and where people are stopping themselves in social situations, keeping themselves from meeting who they want to meet, or speaking up or standing up for someone or to someone.
You do realize that those things aren't actually different on a neurobiological level. A social situation and a quote just physical situation with a gator, they're actually the exact same physical response. They're not like, I wouldn't actually differentiate those, and I'm pretty sure people who study them don't. In fact, I would say the social ones are more traumatic and more dangerous. They feel more traumatic and more dangerous than the pure physical ones, because all that can happen with a gator is a bite. Right? Like the actual danger is not that high there, right? Whereas like in a social situation, shame, embarrassment, ostracization are actually on a physical, the body reacts to shame far, far more intensely than it does to physical pain. Truly.
And it stores it.
Yes.
Your brain and emotions store it. Like the bite is a bite, it's going to heal from the alligator.
Yes.
Rejection, you're going to carry it around.
Unless you actually work that out and feel it out. Yeah, it's totally 100%. I'm well aware of the science behind trauma. Absolutely. No, so I would say social trauma is far more impactful. Yeah. So like, that's what's funny is being bold in either place is hard, but it's easy. It's just as easy for me to be bold in social situations. But that's the thing. You're right. It's not. Most people do get it beaten out of them, or I got the gift of neglect, and so I never cared what my mom or my dad thought because they were never relevant enough to me that I learned that I've got to make them happy, or I've got to be the way they want me to be, right? So that's the irony, man, is that like I developed most of my boldness. Now as an adult, it's a little different, but that was in my 30s when I did that. So all the way up through most of my life, most of my boldness comes from the fact that my parents were so bad, I never Never learned I'm supposed to care what all these other people think that don't matter to me. It was
that's so, because it is foundational. And I also talk about that in my book, is that bold people have a very limited number of people whose opinions they care about, whereas the rest of us, oh, they're all going to laugh at me. It's going to be embarrassing. It's going to be humiliating. We care about complete strangers' opinions of us. And you were, by parentage and / default, because of it, you don't care what anybody thinks, really. You don't worry about what people, I mean, there's certainly people that influence you and matter to you. You care a lot, probably, what Veronica thinks.
Yes. So, dude, in simplistic terms, as a kid, no one in my world cared about me. So why the hell would I care what anyone else thinks? In the most simplistic terms. So honestly, dude, being bold is easy. When that's the trauma you come from and the situation you live in. For me, being bold was easy. I never even had to develop it I did develop it. It was an intuitive sort of thing. It wasn't a conscious decision, right? Whereas like you had to learn how to be bold. Bold was a strategy for me that began at an early age, just because it was the obvious strategy for me and then I never had to learn it, so to speak, because like no one cared about me. So I got the gift of not having to care about anyone else, and now you're right. Like they grow, mature, etc. But the circle of people whose opinions are really impactful on me I can fit them in this little room I'm in, and with room to spare. Maybe even meet the fire code, like it might be 10 people.
Well, and I think what happens also is when you behave in a bold way, there's a positive feedback loop. Like good things are happening. Doors are swinging open that other people are like afraid to approach. Yep. And you don't even see the door after a while. And it's reinforced. People are laughing at you. You're succeeding. You're meeting interesting people and interesting women and whatever, in your life. And you're not stopping yourself because that like maybe you're uncomfortable trying it, but that's where the adventure, that's where the fun, that's where the discovery is. I think one of the things I try to tell people is like, even if you don't have an agenda, and if you're better off not having it, just go in and see what happens. That's actually what that person says. Yeah.
What you just said is a super important point that I hadn't actually thought about either in the context of this, is not having an agenda. Bold with an agenda just makes you an aggressive salesman, which is fine. Like that's a strategy, right? But I outsell almost every salesman I've never been in a company or any situation where any salesperson could outsell me. And the reason is not because I'm a good salesman. Like if I was going to sell speedboats, I think I'd be terrible, right? Really, because like I don't give a damn about speedboats, and there's no possible way I'm going to convince one to buy one because I think they're stupid, right? But everything I quote sell, I don't sell because they're all things I believe in, right? Like books and Scribe. Like I don't have to sell it. I talk about what I believe and feel. It's all real and genuine. And people can disagree with me, of course, but like the best salespeople are always the ones who are selling something they believe in, right? And then it's not selling. It doesn't feel like selling, and it isn't with me. Like I genuinely believe this, and the proof of it is I'll tell people what the downsides are. I'll tell people who shouldn't be doing it not to do it. I'll tell people, you're not a good person to work with us for these reasons. This other company is actually better. Like there's a company called Page 2, who's probably like in our space, there's really only 2 good companies that I think are high level, do high level work and are really, ethical. Page 2 is the other one. And we wrote a huge piece on our blog about traditional public or whatever, our space, and talked about them because I know a ton of people they've worked with. They're great. No one does that. No, because I'm not trying to sell. I'm telling the truth, right? And fine, I'll tell the truth, right? And I remember the owner, I don't even know her. I didn't know her before, and she called me all crying and like so happy, like thank you so much. And so I'm like, you don't even cool. I'm glad you liked it, but like I'm just telling the truth. That's all there is, and it's super easy. But you're 100% right. And I've done this in times in my life. Whenever I go with an agenda, my effectiveness goes down 50 to 80%.
It's almost like desperation. People can smell it on you. They can smell that you're, that's why when people are networking, you can feel their networking. They're like trying, so what do you do? Like, they might as well say, so, how liquid are you?
Right. Yeah. And Fred, I learned this with girls, with dating. I learned very quickly, as a young dude, I liked women and I wanted to be with a lot of women. And, so you talk to a lot of women, and if I like made it clear my goal of talking to her was sleeping with her, even not like, I wouldn't say like, hey, I want to sleep with you, that's why I'm talking to you. Although once I got famous, I did, but that's different. Before I was just a normal dude. No woman wants to hook up with a dude who's talking to her because he just wants to sleep with her or is desperate to sleep with her. But every girl wants to talk to a guy who's out having fun and having a great time and, has no agenda. Yeah, he might be up for it, sure, but that's not why he's there, right? He's there for fun and for entertainment and enjoyment. And if that happens, that happens, right? And once I it became real clear to me early. And then I was like, literally, I would go out and be like, I don't care. Like, even though I really wanted to be with a lot of women, truly, I would go out and I put in my head, I don't care if I hook up tonight. That is not the goal. The goal is to have fun. And then I hooked up as much as I wanted, basically. It was, and once you learn that, it's like, oh, and then that applies to everything in life. Like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to meet somebody really interesting that you say, wow, that's somebody I would really like to get to know, and they're either way more successful than me or they're a famous actor or whatever, those things. If your goal is just to connect with them, people repel people because they rush up to an actor and they go, can I take a selfie with you? And they don't remember the guy's name. You're that guy in this thing, right? And it's like, you don't even know his name and you're going up to him and you're trying to get a selfie to pretend like you know him. How about walking up to him and saying, really appreciate your work. I don't want to bother you. I just wanted you to let you know that. I've had 20-minute conversations with superstar actors because that's all I said. And I never get the selfie because I don't care.
Yeah, right. No, it's 100%. Showing up with no agenda is so... I'd forgotten that because I'd learned that so early and it was so obviously correct. And I made it such a part of me that like, it just, yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I want to get in. I want to talk about Scribe very quickly because it's such a great company. And Ricky and Megan and those people that work for you. The woman who re-edited my book, who went through it the first time. I mean, she came back 150 edits or something like that to it. Just like every page there was something, if not. And I was just going, oh yeah, oh that's better. Oh, she's right. Oh, I said that 4 times. I got to get rid of that. That doesn't even. And she would move it around. It was incredible. It's like 30-40% better by the time she was done, and 20% shorter.
That's what a great editor does. Better and shorter.
Yeah, and when that happens, you just, because you can't do it after a while. You just like, you can read it. I'll give you an amazing example. This was the proofreader who was paying that much attention to content as well as structure and punctuation and stuff. She wrote back, and I had used the term compulsive gambler, and she wrote, don't you mean professional gambler? Because I was talking about how a professional gambler is calculating his losses. Well, it's a compulsive gambler was the opposite of what I meant in the sentence. And she caught it. I could have read it 50 more times and not caught that blunder. So I'm just in awe of your people all the way through.
Thank you.
I wanted to put that on record for you because you and Zach, and then eventually it's Juvan, right? That is your
Juvan.
Juvan is, obviously, and he blew your company up.
I mean, he's the guy, man. He's the man. Like, I'm good at a few things, but that dude. It is the craziest. I mean, I'm sure you know this, being an entrepreneur yourself, but starting a company, being a visionary and a company starter, and being a company scaler and a company runner are so completely different skills. It's kind of breathtaking to me that we almost don't see them as separate roles. Even like the assumption is there are people who start companies and people who scale companies. That should be the assumption. And maybe a few random rock stars can be both, right? But like, I think that should be the starting assumption, is that you shouldn't. No one who's starting companies is scaling companies unless they really want to, and they're just a unicorn, you know?
Well, and what we do as entrepreneurs is we start companies within the company. It's like, oh, let's launch a new product. I mean, we did it with 800 dentists. We blew money doing chiropractors, lawyers, plastic surgeons. We went fail, just millions, right? Trying to recreate the formula instead of staying in our lane, which we eventually got back to. And this was all just because I was an entrepreneur. I had zero knowledge on how to run a business. And the only thing that we were really good at is we knew we wanted to create a great place to go to work.
Yeah.
And my humble brag is that on my last week of work there, we celebrated 3 25-year employees.
Oh, wow.
They had worked, and this was only 28 years into the business. This happened often. These people had their entire adult life was working for me, and it was because of them that I had a great life. I just found people smarter than me everywhere and harder working than me. I was not a particularly hard worker.
That's what I know. Same as me, dude. Like, everyone who's in the company now running it, they're all better at their jobs than I was doing those jobs. Every single one.
Yeah. I want to ask about a couple of things, and I want to be mindful of your time. But plant medicine, you've recently moved in that direction, and I'm very curious about it. It is a wave that's coming, and I'm very excited about it because so much of psychotherapy is so grossly ineffective. And all this stuff is taboo that actually is highly impactful. And I've had a few experiences myself over the years that were transformational. But I'm curious about what you've been doing and what prompted it as well.
Well, so, all right. Psychedelic medicine has been probably the most important thing I've ever done in my life. Like, more important than my marriage and even being a father, because the fact is I probably wouldn't be married without it, and I would be a pretty bad father. Or at least much, much worse than I am now. And so I started about 4 years ago. And long story short, basically, I had been years of therapy, talk therapy for 4 years, like going 4 times a week, like amazing, or tons and tons of different therapeutic modalities. And it's not like I was like in some horrible, miserable depression, but like, essentially, I got everything I wanted in life. I got rich, I got famous, I got as good looking as I can look, right? Which is there's an upper limit to that, which isn't very high, but I did the best I could. And then it was like, and I was, happier than when I was poor, broke, and a slob, but like, wasn't that happy, right? It's just like, 10% happier. And I'm like, how the hell can I have all this money and this fame? And like, I thought 10% of this would be all I would ever need to be ecstatic. And I wasn't. And like, eventually I realized the problem had to be inside of me. Right. And so then I tried every therapy I could. Most of them didn't work at all. A few helped some, like talk therapy was helpful. It was good in certain ways, and then I long story short, a buddy of mine did MDMA therapy, and I saw the change. I saw the change in him. He wasn't trying to sell me on it. I saw it. And I was like, that's it. That is what I want. He became, seriously, I'm not kidding, 50% happier almost overnight. I mean, it was like he let go of so much stuff that he'd been carrying, and it was just like, that's what I want. And so got his, he referred me to his guide, and then I started, and man, it like, It has been both the most challenging 4 years of my life without even, there's nothing even close. It's been so hard in so many ways. Because like basically to sum up what you do in psychedelic therapy, like the MDMA and the psilocybin, those are just tools. Like they're not the thing. Like, no one builds a house and says, man, my hammer's the thing. You don't carry your hammer around the rest of your life. Your hammer is just a tool to help you build the house, right? Same thing with psychedelics. The mushroom or the molecule or whatever you're taking is just a tool to help you bring up old emotions, bring up things that you have not felt, that you've pushed away, that you avoided your whole life, and face them and then let them go. And that's really hard. Like whether it's grief or shame or anger or rage or even joy or sadness, whatever. And so the last 4 years have been full of learning how to feel my emotions and then feeling them, all the old ones. And it's really hard when you go through it, but it is also incredibly rewarding. Because now it's just like, man, I'm just so, on a day-to-day basis, I'm so content and calm. And when I'm happy, I have my moments of happiness are so happy now. It's not like I'm happy all day. That's like weird. But when I'm happy, I'm really happy, right? And like I can be present with my kids and I can understand my kids and I can I'm everything in my life is better. Everything.
Well, and I think you've been lucky enough to have achieved that level of financial reward and personal success and say, okay, this isn't everything. Because a lot of people spend their whole lives thinking if I just had enough money, everything would be perfect. And I've blown enough money and bought enough shit, right? To know that it's like I'm 3% happier with the BMW than I am with the Honda. It's like after about a week and a half, except for the payments, right?
Which are painful, right?
After a while, it's like you go, wow, this is really, and then the maintenance that, as if there wasn't enough insult. But that I had an experience with taking mushrooms, and I basically time traveled back to being 12 years old. And I suddenly realized in that moment how emotionally connected I was to my dad. Because I always blame my mom for the divorce. No, actually, it was and I blame my dad for the divorce. Right. And in that moment, I suddenly identified with how hurt he felt about losing her love. Yeah. And that he just didn't know. I mean, I had two parents. They didn't know anything about they never said I love you in their entire relationship. I never saw them hug or kiss. Right. So that was an excellent foundation for me in my, dating life. But I suddenly realized his emotional pain because he never showed it. He never talked about it. And it changed my whole relationship towards my mother, whom I resented. And to just like they were both kids, with nothing. I mean, my dad's father was a brute, and just and my mom lost her dad at 6, and so they didn't know anything, and they were rock solid as foundational pattern. I mean, they didn't teach us anything in terms of business. It's, the basics of try saving money. That would be an interesting idea. Right. I'm my mom, spend a little more than you make every minute of your life. But that's and MDMA as well, that with couples to be able to talk about really difficult things together while you're in that state, it allows you to release them. And I think people need to understand, and this is what MDMA was originally used for pharmaceutically, till they made it illegal.
100%.
And you've done ayahuasca as well.
I've done ayahuasca 4 times. Yeah, it's fantastic medicine. I would not recommend ayahuasca for beginners. I do not recommend it. It is very, very intense. It is no joke. That's a place I'm glad I waited to do that until I had more experience with my emotions with psychedelics and other stuff. For me, the 2 medicines that are the most effective for people at the beginning of their journeys with medicines are MDMA is for almost everyone the optimal place to start, because it is so gentle and there's a saying that MDMA is always your friend, right? Which is what makes it so great as a place to start. Now, as you get more advanced, it can actually become a downside, because you try and control the experience, and you can do it with MDMA to some extent, right? Whereas like psilocybin, which can also be a very good place to start for a lot of people, but psilocybin, you can't really control. Like once you're on that ride, you're on the ride, right?
Right,
And then
right.
now the intensity of the ride varies greatly depending on the amount you take, et cetera, et cetera. But once you go, you go. And so, psilocybin is like a multi-tool. Like it can work for almost anything. It's not really the best for anything, but it works for everything. And so, like the way a multi-tool is not the best knife, not the best pliers, not the best screwdriver, but it'll work in a pinch for any of those. Same thing with psilocybin, which I've used multiple times and has been extremely useful for me at certain times. Totally. I mean, they're both great medicines, and they're really good entry points, because they're both psilocybin at lower doses is very gentle, and MDMA is very, very gentle, and you can have experiences that are still close enough to your day-to-day reality to integrate and to really make useful. Whereas like, I mean, listen, beginners can jump in the deep end, and you can do ayahuasca and have crazy experiences. And some people, that's what they do, and it works. But I've known quite a few people who've done that, and it was very challenging for them.
Yeah, it's people need to know that if you're going to do any of this, do it with a guide, with
Oh
a trip
yes.
master.
No doubt. I do not do this recreationally. I don't know how people take LSD and go to concerts, man. I take LSD and cry for 12 hours. Like I have no idea how people do. Seriously. Like that's so funny. I'd never taken drugs before I did psychedelic medicine. Seriously, never. And which a lot of people are like, that blows their mind, but it's just true. And I don't know how people do this recreation. I really don't. That's probably why I never did it recreationally. I had a feeling that if I started, like a lot of stuff would come up, and if I'd done that somewhere publicly or with a bunch of people, it would not have gone well. But yeah, absolutely. The whole time, and I've done quite a few sessions, dozens over the last 4 years. Every single time is with like guides who have spent decades doing this, who are very, very experienced, who I trust deeply, who I know pretty well. This is not a thing to do recreationally. I do not recommend doing it on your own. Some people do, and things are okay, but nah, like
There's risk
I wouldn't do
involved
that.
that,
There's
and you're
major
not
risk.
in a position to do anything about it.
Yeah. Like for example, I mean, my mother-in-law did MDMA therapy after watching me and seeing the results in me, and she had a lot of really hard stuff come up. And it's the sort of stuff where if no one had been there, it would have been essentially re-traumatizing, like bringing up old memories that were, man, crazy intense, like as bad as it gets. And if you don't have someone there to help you work through those, it can get bad. It doesn't have to, but it's one of those things where for most people, a guide is for almost everybody.
Yeah, that's my admonition to everyone, and I think the part of it is, don't think about this as a recreational drug. It is you're trying to bring something to the surface. You're trying to work on yourself, and you're trying to work on doing hard stuff with yourself. I always tell people almost nothing easy is worth doing. Right? Stop avoiding the hard stuff, because that's where all the results come from. When people bitch about me, it's like, wow, this business is really hard. It's really complicated. And I said, you should be happy about it. It makes it a lot harder to compete with you. And if it were easy, everybody'd be doing it. Everybody'd be selling it on Amazon. So the other thing that there's a couple of things that you said. You did that lecture at Pitt. You did I assume it was the commencement lecture, or was it something else?
Hold on, you went out. Sorry, you went out for a second. What'd you say?
The was it a commencement lecture you did at Pitt University? Losing the audio. we're freezing up here. So
Get rid of this stuff later.
yes, of course. Yeah, your resolution is off, so I'm assuming that you keep freezing up. We'll wait it out for connectivity's sake.
So
yeah, it's not coming back. It's probably on my side. My upload stuff is really poor in this building for some reason. Come on in, believe in you. Yeah, it's editor, you have to find this right at about 45 minutes.
yeah.
Yeah. See, I don't even know if you can hear me, but it won't, it's not coming back. Well, come on, it usually comes back after a brief wave of broadband bullshit.
Oh no.
Should we leave and come back? I don't know. I don't know if it matters.
I don't know if that'll make a difference.
Can you hear me say everything?
You keep going in and out, but I can hear you.
Yeah, but does my video go out, or does my audio go out too? Yeah, your audio's going out. Yeah. Fuck. How about if you drop out and come back in? Because I don't think it's going to do it unless we if you can hear me, I'm gonna, yeah, that makes sense. I get the same lack of resolution.
You back?
I think I might be back.
All right.
That was remarkable. Um, so I was talking about that the lecture you did at Pitt. Is it Pitt College, Pitt University? I don't know which one it is. Was that
Pitt
commencement?
University. Yeah.
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 That was colorful, but it was because at a certain point I said, wow, he's being ranked very high as an influencer. But what you laid out for them was incredible life wisdom. And I wish every high schooler in junior year could read it or hear it, because
yeah. I mean, I was just trying
know,
to tell them the truth, man. I was just trying to tell them the truth, and that's it. It's funny because only about maybe a quarter of the audience got it, and they really got it. Like they loved it,
yeah.
right? And then the rest were like either bored or confused, or some of them were mad, and or they just want to talk about drinking. Like, and it was like, okay, like we can do that too.
Right.
That's fine.
We brought you in to talk about,
Right.
getting drunk and doing crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing that struck me, and I want to just touch on it quickly, is what you said is that rules are for other people's benefit most of the time. And it's when you get that, I think so much of how you move through the world changes. I think that can be foundational for your boldness, is you're like, what is this rule? Because I tell people as an exercise, if you see a sign that says employees only, go in just for practice. Because in your brain, you're telling yourself, oh, it's going to be something horrible. Nothing will happen, right? That's nobody's going to even say anything because the sign was the only thing keeping you out. Its rules are just, they're making it so that they don't have to kick people out or talk to people. They want a little private room. But it's like so many rules are out there to keep you in line. And I'm going to recommend people to go to your website and just read the whole thing, because the thing about Santa Claus and Christianity is that's worth the price of admission right there. But the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is parenthood, because I'm sure that's had a profound effect on your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's been as almost as big as psychedelic medicine, maybe even bigger in terms of as a catalyst for change. It's been at least as big. Yeah.
And they are eventually going to read your works, and
way ahead of you. They already. So okay, this is a hilarious story for everyone but me. My daughter, who's 5, Vaughn, she had an accident and got some poop in her pants or whatever, and was like pretty embarrassed about it. And my wife said, "Oh, honey, don't worry about it. Daddy pooped his pants when he was an adult in a hotel lobby." And she's like, oh, really? And then Bishop was there as my 7-year-old. He goes, no, he didn't. And she's like, no, he really did. And so she literally pulled up the movie that made on my first book, and it has the scene in the Embassy Suites where I got, long story short, I got super drunk and I couldn't find a bathroom. I ran across the hotel lobby pooping myself, and it got all over the floor, and I was a disastrous mess. And so she showed them the scene in the movie. And I mean, they thought it was hilarious, but they still kind of didn't believe mommy. They thought maybe this is just because they know movies are made up. They're not real. And so I got home and they both sprint out to the car. Like the house is on fire. Daddy, did you poop in a hotel lobby? And I'm like, and I look up and my wife's like, she's like, well, it just kind of came out. And I'm like, yes. Because one of the rules in the house, we told our kids, promise them, never going to lie to you. So I said, yes, Daddy pooped in a hotel lobby. And I mean, the laughter and the absolute exuberance coming from them, they just could not stop. And then my daughter comes up with, like an hour later, a song about it. Daddy pooped in the lobby. And I don't know if you've ever been around little kids who get on something, but they don't ever.
They're not afraid to repeat themselves. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then I have a 3-year-old too, and so like they can talk, and so literally it was a chorus of little children. Daddy, pooped in the lobby, daddy. I mean, I have a video on. If you go to my site, I actually wrote a story on this. I have a video. I filmed my daughter, so you can actually kind of get the rhythm in your head, and dude, like they just and then of course now this is 6 months ago they found out or 9 months, and they still like I'm like, Vaughn, you need to clean up your room. She's like, well, I said, Vaughn, your room's a mess. You need to clean up. Yeah, well, I didn't poop in the hotel lobby, so that's fine.
Right.
You need to
gave
clean
them
that
a
up.
massive get out of jail
Dude.
free card there.
Dude, that they use constantly and incessantly. Yes. They tell strangers, like we'll be out like talking to people, and then Vaughn will say, my daddy pooped in a hotel lobby. Did you know that? And the people will look at her like, what? What did you say? I'm like, no, they'll look at me, right? I'm like, no, well, actually, she's right. That did happen. And then if the person knows the context, right? They've read my stuff, or if they know me, then they think it's so funny. And
yeah, that your kids are now broadcasting it. They're yes. For anybody who doesn't know, they're making sure they know. Yeah.
My own little children are already trolling me about this stuff. Yeah. And then the best part, like I was like, you guys are making fun of this. This is how we have all this stuff. It's because I wrote that. And then Vaughn was super confused. She's like, cause she's 5. Like, how does pooping in a lobby make us money? And then Bishop says, because he'd known about my books. He goes, oh, Vaughn, it's because Daddy wrote a book about pooping in the lobby. And his poop stories, and that's why he made money. I was like, they're not just poop stories. This is brilliant literature. So
I'm being compared to Bukowski, kid.
Yeah, right.
So Tucker, thank you so much for this. I just wanted to express appreciation for your candor and your sharing of this stuff. I'm doing a 2-day workshop on Superbold coming up. Yes. And I wanted to ask you what you would, if you had one thing you were going to tell to my people who are going through this workshop. I know it's hard to narrow down because you have 180 things that you've learned already in life. 1 or 2 things. You don't have to limit it to one, but
about boldness or anything.
About boldness, or about anything. Just if you're trying to grow, if you're trying to get better.
All right. So this is, if someone were to ask me, how do I get bolder or how to become bold? Honestly, I'd probably send them to you to figure out the exact tactics. Because we talked about, like someone who's naturally great at it or great from a young age doesn't often know how to be great, right? So I would be like, you should talk to Fred and just study with Fred. But the thing I would give them, the meta mindset shift is boldness is a choice, right? Once you understand that understand and accept boldness is a choice and you can choose it. Once you get that, then everything else is okay. Well, how do I choose it? Which is fine. And you might need help with that, right? If it's very hard for you, I get. But most people, I think, and this would apply to almost any sort of desirable trait. Most people think that it's not possible, or they can't do it, or only other people can do it, or something like that. And okay, if we're talking about physical traits, maybe height falls into that category. Okay, fine. But if we're talking about behavioral, it's always a choice. It is always a choice. And whatever behavioral trait you want to have, you can have it. And it begins with deciding you are going to have it. Believing it's possible, then deciding you're going to have it, I guess. Yeah, that's the whole point. It's a choice. Okay, I can have it, and I'm going to choose it. Now, then how? Okay, great. I mean, sometimes you got to get some help on the how. I'm with you on that, right? And so those people should go learn from you. But in fact, the people in the workshop probably already are. The ones on the periphery who are thinking about it but aren't going because they don't believe it's possible for them. Those especially are the ones who have to understand it is a choice. that Fred can teach you all the tactics in the world. He can teach you the best
Right,
tactics. He can teach you bulletproof guaranteed tactics. But if you don't think they're possible and you don't actually do them, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, that's so true. I tell people this book isn't something to read; it's something to do. Right?
Yes.
It's full of exercises that you're going to do, and if you don't do them, you're just going to have some interesting ideas that you're never going to apply. But I love that. Thank you. That's a great thing. I will steal that and include that.
Awesome.
And so again, thank you very much for all of these insights. We could have covered a lot more things. You're into all sorts of new stuff, but I want to make it digestible for people. There's a lot here. And so Tucker, thank you very much. TuckerMax.com, everybody, if you want to find out more about him, you want to get emails from him and find out what he's up to and just understand everything that he's into. There's some great YouTube videos out there and videos on his website. Dive in. He's an influencer for a reason. He has gained some serious wisdom along the way. So
thanks, you, my
Tucker.
man.
Yep. And everybody out there, keep on being bolder.